Lesson 11, rounding decimals. So today we're going to continue our work with decimals. In the last lesson, all we were really worried about was how many digits there were in the decimals and deciding which decimal was bigger or putting them in order based on their value. But today we need to take a little bit of a closer look at decimal place value. So what I have for you here is a place value chart, and notice we have a decimal point in the middle. Now on the left hand side, so this side right over here, we have the whole numbers, and that's what we were working with right at the beginning of the year, the first week of school, right? We had the ones place, the tens place, the hundreds place, the thousands place, and we actually went way even further that up into the billions and trillions. All right, but for today, this is good enough for the whole numbers. Now, when we have a decimal point after the ones place, anything to the right of it is representing a piece of a whole number. So that's why we have here a fractional part. A fraction is really just saying a piece of a whole. Now, notice that we have on the right-hand side here, we have words describing the place value that are very similar to the ones for the whole numbers. Now, what you have to do is you have to think about, maybe I'll use a different color than purple. I'm doing lots of drawing on here today. What you have to think about is the ones place and the decimal point as kind of like the center point of your number. Okay, so anything to the left of the ones place, we're increasing the whole number place value, and anything to the right, those are decimals. And notice the matching words, or not quite matching, but almost matching words that we have on either side of the ones place. We have the tens place on the whole number side, and we have the tenths place with a TH on the right hand side. So think about the ones place and the decimal point as kind of like your center, and then you actually just work out from there. So on the whole number side, we have the hundreds place. On the fractional or decimal side, we have the hundredths. On the whole number side, we have thousands, and in the decimal side, we have thousandths. Okay, so if you've got your whole number decimal places memorized, as you should for at least the first few of them, it's easy to figure out what would be the names of the decimal place values, just thinking about that it has to kind of match the one on the either side. All right, so just a note before we get into rounding as well. When you have a decimal or a whole number with a decimal part, such as this number right here, quite often we say it just for simplicity and easiness sake, we would say that as 4.53. That's not really the official math way to say it. The official math way to say it would be to say the whole number first. So you say 4, then you say and for the decimal point. Okay, so the and represents the decimal. And then you say the number after it using the place value chart. All right, so very similar to whole number place value. You say what is there, and then here we would actually just say 53 hundredths because our last number is in the hundredths place. Okay, so just be aware that when we say something like 4.53, that's not really the official way to say it, but it's just a bit of a shorter form way to say things. All right, so let's get into rounding. We are going to follow the same rounding rules that we followed with the whole numbers, but now we just have to pay attention to the decimal place value. All right, so I have up here 4.536, and what we're going to do is we're going to be rounding that number to various place values. Now remember that when we round to a certain place value, we always want to circle what I call the target number. So the place value that they're asking for is the target number. So let's do the first one. We have here the nearest tenth. So in order to round this number to the nearest tenth, we need to find the tenths place, which would be right beside the decimal. Remember back at the beginning, think about the ones and the decimal place as your center point, and then go off to the right from there. We have the tenths place. So that's our target number. The 3 is our helper number. It helps us decide what are we going to do with that target number? What are we going to do with that 5? And then you think to yourself that little rhyme. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So what we would do here, since the 3 means let it rest. We would round this to 4.5. Now with whole numbers, what you had to do was you had to fill in the rest of the digits with zeros. You could do that here. You could write those zeros. It doesn't change the value. Remember from my last video that if you're adding zeros after the decimal places, it doesn't change the value of the number. So you could write those zeros, but it probably would be faster to just not even write them at all, because 4.5 is the same value as 4.50 or 4.500 or 0000, continuing on. All right, so now let's see if I can erase my, oh no, I'll erase my 4.5. I'll just put it back. Oh no, oh dear, here we go. So the nearest tenth was 4.5. Now to round to the nearest hundredth, we have to go to the hundredths place. So that's right beside the tenths place. So that's our target number. We underline our helper number beside it. Our helper number helps us decide what we are going to do with that target number. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. Since it's 5 or more, we have a 6 as our helper number. We are going to bump that 3 up 1. So we're going to do 4.54. All right, so that would be rounded to the nearest hundredth. Now, an important vocabulary thing to know is when your textbook's going to ask you to round to the nearest whole number, what it means is the number that is closest to the decimal place, or you can think about that as like the ones place or the units. Okay, so when you see round to the nearest whole number, it's talking about the number that is closest, the whole number that's closest to the decimal place, so the one that's in the ones position. So if, for instance, I made this number a 34 or something like that, it's still asking for the ones place or the number that's right beside the decimal. Okay, so that's what it means for the nearest whole number. So since our 4 is our target number, get rid of that 3, the 5 becomes the helper number. It helps us decide what are we going to do with that 4. Well, it's 5 or more, so we need to raise the score. So the nearest whole number here would be a 5. And just like the other ones, you could do 5 decimal 0 or 000, but you don't actually need to because that means the same thing as 5. So nearest whole number would be a 5. And maybe I could say if this was a 34.536 and you need to round it, you would end up with a 35. All right, and then one more thing that's going to come up in your lesson today is you're going to be asked to round to the nearest dollar. Now, the nearest dollar is very similar to the nearest whole number. When you're asked for the nearest dollar, it's talking again about that ones place. So the dollar or the number that is closest to the decimal. So that becomes your target number. This becomes your helper number. It helps you decide what to do with that 5. Well, since it's 4 or less, we let the 5 rest. And then our final answer would be 85, or you could do 85.00 to show $85. All right, so that is it. It might be helpful to, maybe I can erase all my markings on here, might be helpful to pause the video and take a look at this chart when you're deciding on the place value, or maybe even this one. I'll erase all my markings for you. So pause the video wherever you'd like in order to help you figure out which digits match up with which place value, and then follow those same rounding rules that we learned in the last rounding lesson, and then hopefully this shouldn't be too challenging for you. But if you have any problems, if you run into any issues, please let me know. I am very happy to help.